and they're into the stretch, and Mucho Gusto is taking the lead. Mucho Gusto comes to the 8th pole, opening up to lead by 4. And back into second is Mr. Freeze on the inside. Then Bodie Express, Diamond Hoops, War Story running on late. Mucho Gusto in the Pegasus World Cup. He won it by 5 lengths.
Welcome back to Racing Rundown. Today on this video we will be previewing the Grade 2 San Antonio Handicap from Santa Anita Park, a mile and a 16th for 3-year-olds and elder. We got 8 horses in here. We're going to do the usual drift on here, go through each horse individually, and I will analyze what I think their chances are in this race. So we'll start with the number 1, the Cowbred Take the 101, who's coming out of a good run in a Cowbred stake, second in the Cary Grant at Del Mar on the 22nd of November. My issue with Take the 101 is when you look at his races in open company, they leave a lot to be desired, whether it's on dirt or turf. He was 4th in the Awesome again. That's a very deceiving 4th place finish, you would think. On paper, it's not a terrible effort, but he was very, very well beaten in a 5-horse field. So there's definitely not a lot to be taken from him out of that race. His other 2 races in open company were the Thunder Road and the Del Mar Derby. 9th and 11th place, very poor finishes for him. So I don't really think he has a very good chance to win this race. It really just boils down to he doesn't really run well in open company. And this is a race where there are several proven horses at the graded stake level. Take the 101 is not, therefore I will be passing over him in this race. The number 2 horse is another horse who does not really have a lot of bright spots in graded stake and really just in stakes races in general. This is Kiss Today Goodbye. Only 2 wins in 10 career starts, 3 third-place finishes, but 2 of those third-place finishes come at the maiden level, and he was 3rd out of 4 horses in the Shared Belief Stakes. That's his best run in a stake race. Does have a couple of starts in graded stakes, the Twilight Derby and the Del Mar Derby, 4th in the Twilight, 5th in Del Mar Derby. He is coming out of an allowance win, but like I mentioned that already, that's at the allowance level, and there are several proven stakes horses in here. We saw him in the Shared Belief Stakes, I have made it very well known that I don't think very highly of any of those 4 horses that were in that race, and he did not run very well in there. And given the fact that this is a lot more talented of a group than that Shared Belief Stakes was, I really don't think Kiss Today Goodbye has the ability to run a winning effort in this race. The number 3 horse is Extra Hope, who's coming out of a win in the Native Diver at Del Mar. 3 starts this year, 2 victories. He's 1 loss this year, which was a really bad on paper 5th place finish, but when you look deeper into it, he was coming off the layoff in that race, so definitely did look like, given the fact that he has had some success in the last 2 races, that he definitely did need the race, so I'm not really going to be putting too much stock into that. I did like his race in the Native Diver. He did beat Midcourt, a horse who is consistent somewhat at the graded stakes level. I don't think very highly of Midcourt, but Midcourt is a horse that is around in a lot of these Southern California graded stakes races, and Extra Hope did run a nice race to beat him, so I will give him credit for that. I just don't think Extra Hope stacks up in terms of talent with the other horses in here. He's run in a lot of races against horses that are significantly better than him, even going back to when he was a 2-year-old in Los Al Futurity. He was beaten by Mucho Gusto, who he will be running against in that race, and wasn't close to Mucho Gusto, who in himself wasn't close to the winner of that race. Improbable was also beaten in his division of the Rebel Stakes, and did get beat last year in the Native Diver. But I think he has rebounded at least somewhat from getting beat by some of those better horses when he was a 2- and 3-year-old. I just don't think that he is going to stack up to the level of your Mucho Gustos, your Sharp Samurais, and even to a lesser extent your Midcourts in this race. I like him in terms of what he's done as of late, but I don't think he has the ability to win this race. But I do think he could run well. The next horse we're going to move on to is Sharp Samurai, who I just mentioned in the last segment, who's a horse that throughout his career, whatever surface he's been running on, overall very consistent racehorse. And that's something that I really value in racehorses, consistency. He's been in the money in most of his career races, with the exception of 2, and those were two of his first 3 races, and a lot of those races where he was not in the money, those are fourth place finishes. So a very strong career in his own right. Lots of experience at the stakes level. And this year we discovered a new element with him. For the most part, he had been running on turf in some of these local California graded stakes turf races, but this year we've seen him perform very well, running second to Maximum Security in the Pacific Classic and a very good third place finish in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He did have a little bit of trouble in that race, and you know, me bringing that up, I think that had he had a little bit of a cleaner trip, could have run second. Obviously wasn't going to beat Nick Sko on the day, but it was a very good effort for him in that Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So I do really think that he has discovered a new element with his career, and I'm really interested to see if he gets to go consistently on the dirt, because I think he could have some success in here, and I do think he is a horse that is primed to run a very big race in the San Antonio. The next horse we're going to move on to is Combatant, a horse who I have made it very well known. I do not think very highly of this horse by any degree. I think he's a prime example of what I call the John Sadler formula, and it's where John Sadler takes a horse that's underperforming for whatever reason from another trainer, gets them out to Southern California, gets them in one of these Grade 1 races, be it the Gold Cup, the Santa Anita Handicap, or even the Pacific Classic, turns them around, gets them one big Grade 1 win or one really big stakes win, and then they never run back up to that level again. That was the case with Higher Power, and even going back a little bit farther, back to 2015, that was the case with a horse called Hard Aces. He won the Gold Cup in 2015 and never really ran back up to that level, and I think that's the perfect example of what Combatant's done. He was in a very weak edition of the Santa Anita Handicap this year. The favorite of that race, Gift Box, you remember, scratched out. Midcourt's not a very good horse going a mile and a quarter. It opened up for him to get a Grade 1 win. Credit to John Sadler for his ability to take horses that are underperforming for other trainers and be able to get some good races out of them. But I think that his good races are behind him. We've seen it with his very bad performance in the Oakland Handicap. Very, very disappointing effort in the San Diego, and even his ninth place finish in the Del Mar Handicap on grass. Has rebounded a little bit, was third in the Tokyo City Cup, but that third in the Native Diver was a really good third at all. And for that reason, I think Combatant, I would say that a lot of people would be in agreement with me, have moved off of Combatant, really kind of seeing that Santa Anita Handicap win this year was a little bit of a fluke. So made it pretty obvious. I don't really think very highly of Combatant, and I don't think that he can win this race. The next horse that we're going to move on to is Midcourt. Did almost stumble and say Midcourt in the last segment. I've been talking a lot about him. I think he is a horse that is going to be a factor in this race. Midcourt, for better or for worse, I don't like him in terms of his talent, but he is a very consistent horse, and he gets back out to the mile and a 16th distance. I think that this is one of Midcourt's better distances. Definitely don't like him going a mile and a quarter, but I think, as we've seen with him, he won the Native Diver last year going a mile and a 16th, the mile and a 16th, mile and an 8th. Those are the distances that Midcourt wants to go. But my issue with him is he tends to get beat on the spot by, you can call them in those races the better horses, obviously beaten twice by Maximum Security and Improbable in some of the later year stakes in the Pacific Classic and the Awesome again. And what wasn't a very tight photo finish with Maximum Security in the San Diego. So, those are three races where he was beaten on the day by better horses. And even, going back to the San Antonio last year when he was beaten by Gift Box in that race. So I just think that Midcourt, when he runs in races where there are clearly better horses than him, he doesn't usually get the edge in terms of talent. And I think that's what's going to be the case this weekend. Mucho Gusto, I don't think anyone would really dispute that Mucho Gusto is a better horse than Midcourt. We can argue about some of the other horses underneath Midcourt in terms of the odds board. Aside from that, I just don't think that Midcourt is going to be able to win this race purely because there are better horses than him on talent in here. And when that is the case, Midcourt comes up short. The next horse we're going to move on to is a late developing 3-year-old for Richard Baltus, Idol. It was second in his first career start back on Kentucky Derby Day at Churchill Downs, but has won 2 races since then, a maiden and then on allowance level at Churchill Downs. So really promising start to a career for him. Obviously, he's unproven at the graded stakes level, and I would say he's a horse to definitely look out for in the future. I'm not really sure how he stacks up in terms of stakes competition in this race, because these are proven stakes horses. He's a 3-year-old. He looks that he could have some strong potential, but I'm not really sure if that potential is realized yet. And even if it is, I'm not sure if that potential is better than some of the top horses in here. So Idol, I would say, definitely is a horse you can watch out for in the future, maybe even races later on into 2021, early parts of that, races like the San Pasqual, and even going toward the Santa Anita Handicap. So I think he's definitely a horse to watch for the future. His allowance win, very impressive, 5 3/4 lengths over a couple horses who had a couple decent horses, even Accession, a horse who ran second in the Rebel Stakes back in March. So not terrible horses in the slightest. He's a horse that definitely has a lot of potential, and I think is one that we can definitely keep an eye on in terms of future. Not really sure how he stacks up in that, and because I don't really know whether or not he can beat this type of field, I'm going to hold off on him for now, for the moment. And the final horse in this race is this year's Pegasus World Cup winner, Mucho Gusto, back off of a very long layoff. Hasn't raced since the Saudi Cup. That was 10 months ago. When he did run a good 4th place finish, he was beaten by world-class horses in that race. Maximum Security, Midnight Bisou, and Ben Battle, all 3 of them really, really good race horses. He finished in front of some other really nice horses in that race. I don't really need to run through everything from the Saudi Cup. Did beat a fairly weak field in the Pegasus World Cup, but he handled it as good as you could have hoped for a horse of his talent level. That was a very impressive win visually. Again, like I mentioned, not a lot of overall really talented horses, but it was a win nonetheless, and he did what he had to do in that race, and it was, for that type of level, an impressive race. And like I mentioned, the run in the Saudi Cup definitely does give some optimism for him. I've always thought very highly of Mucho Gusto, even going back before the Pegasus. I thought that he was a horse to watch out for in terms of 4-year-old campaign. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the majority of his 4-year-old campaign. I think if he had campaigned, he could have had a lot of say in terms of races in Southern California, but unfortunately we didn't get to see that. My one issue with him is the layoff. Had he not been coming off of a 10-month layoff, I would definitely pick him in this race, but I just don't like the 10-month layoff in here, and for that reason, I'm going to have to look against him. And ultimately, I did settle on Sharp Samurai. Like I said about him, I think he discovered a whole new element with his career, with the really good run of the Breeders' Cup, and even the finish that he had in the Pacific Classic, albeit well beaten by Maximum Security, but it was a good finish nonetheless. So I think he can finally get his first stakes win on the dirt. Hasn't won a race since 2018, but I think that he does have a really good chance to win this race. So I'm going to take him on top in here. Do want to preface, though, that if I do think Mucho Gusto is the most talented horse in the race, just don't feel comfortable taking him off the layoff. And with that being mentioned, that's it for this video. If you do play this race, good luck. Thank you for stopping by, and we will see you next time for one more preview in the year 2020.
Midcourt to the outside. Combatant trying his best down toward the rail. 1 furlong to run. Extra Hope has something left. Extra Hope in front down to the 16th pole. Midcourt, Combatant, and Royal Ship. They're coming to the line, and Extra Hope turns the tables on Midcourt in the Native Diver.